What are the basic steps in selling a home? Now, there are several basic steps that most transactions will go through from beginning to end, but just about every single real estate transaction is different. So there will be a lot of other things that may be in there as well, but these are just the basics. So stay tuned. Welcome back to our channel. If this is your very first time here, my name is Laura Rosequist and I am a licensed realtor here in the state of Utah. And today we are talking about the basic steps to selling a home. Now, the very first thing you want to do is you're going to have a plan put in place. You're going to sell your home. Where are you going to go to? How soon do you need to be there? And things of that nature. You're going to find a good realtor, and a good realtor is different than just real estate agent. And I have a video on how to find a good realtor. And then you're going to, meet with that realtor, and you're going to go over timing and staging. The realtor is going to be taking a tour of your property and showing you, how to prepare your property, how to stage it. There's going to be a plan put into place if your home's vacant. Maybe we're going to do some virtual staging. So all of that will be coordinated and planned. Pricing strategy is a huge deal. There are basically three things that come down in selling your home, and that is price, location, and condition. Well, you can't change the location, so you're going to make the condition the best you can, and a good realtor is going to help you with that. And then a good realtor is going to provide you with all of the information you need to know to make a good decision on where to price your home. And your realtor will assist with that and bring all of the information necessary for you to come to a great pricing strategy. And then what you're going to do is you need to go over the contracts that you'll be signing. Now, there will be some basic contracts like a Rep C, real estate purchase contract, but there are also like over 40 different addendums. And a lot of those may not be used, but some of them will be. I've had transactions where the file is really thick because of, a lot of different addendums that were used, a lot of different things were changed in the transaction, a very complex transaction, just not your straight up transaction. But there are some things that you need to know in the basic real estate purchase contract, such as when can you get out of the contract? What needs to take place in order for you to get out of the contract? What condition do you have to leave the property when you leave? When do you have to leave the property? So there's some things that you need to understand. You're going to discuss with your realtor, what happens if we have multiple offers? There's three options that you have as a seller when there's multiple offers. So all of this needs to be discussed up front. And then you're going to talk about, pictures, lockbox, signage, marketing strategy. All of these things will be talked about. Now, I just want to touch upon lockbox. Now, there's a difference between electronic lockbox and just one of those little contractor lockboxes, you can go Home Depot and buy, that have the little spin, little code that you put in. You just turn the little spin thingies. I can't remember the name of what you call them at the moment. But anyway, those codes are put on the MLS under the agent remarks. So, we have what 10,000 agents here in the state of Utah. Any one of those could go in there and see the agent remarks and know what that code is. They could see, oh, the home's vacant, and they could decide to just swing by there and go in there. So I don't want anybody going into any of my listings. If I were a seller, I won't want anybody going into my home, regardless if it's vacant, and looking at it. Who knows, maybe camping out and spending the night. So anyway, have an electronic lockbox on your property is the safest way to go. For example, your realtor can also block out certain times. In my opinion, that your home should be accessed at 10 o'clock at night. So, unless it's an unusual situation, it's been prearranged. But, I don't want people going into my listings in my sellers' homes in the middle of the night or outside of a certain, time range. And I want to know who's accessing the home, when they're accessing the home. Is it during their scheduled appointment time? Is it the right person accessing the home? And I also want all the contact information. And when you have a lockbox put on your property, where that's the only way you can get the key and access the property, that is the safest way to protect you. And also a good realtor is going to want that for you as well. So you're going to talk about signage. Maybe you don't want everyone knowing you're selling your home. It's a confidential kind of thing. So maybe we won't have a sign to put in the yard. We're going to talk about photos and pictures and what kind of pictures we're going to have. Are we going to have aerials? You know, a lot of it's what kind of property is it? If it's an isolated wooded property, you want to be able to, for sure, have aerials done. You know, it depends on what features of the property you really want to pinpoint. You know, for example, if you have a townhome, you want a 3D. You know, you want to be able to go in and have people shop when they shop online and be able to turn that property around and see all 3 levels and get a clear, crystal clear picture of what they're going to go look at. And also you're going to talk about security cameras. If you have security already on the property, you know, you need to know how to disable that, disarm that. So when someone comes in the home, you know, all of a sudden the police aren't called. And also we need to disclose if there's any video surveillance on the property, but by law, you have to disclose that. So all of that will be addressed. Also, you talk about when are you going to show the property? Are there certain time frames you're not going to show the property? How much notice do you need in order to show the property? You know, you've got 5 kids and the kitchen's a huge mess, and all of a sudden someone says, "Oh, we're going to be there in 30 minutes." Okay, well, is that acceptable? And if it is, what's the strategy in getting all the kids in the car and grabbing everything and throwing it into a big bin and getting in the back of the van and kind of driving down the street? I mean, is that something you want to do? And if it is, then there's a strategy your realtor can help you with to work that out. And also, now it's time for the open house. So we're going to talk about open house strategy. How often? What's going to take place during the open house? You know, it depends on the kind of property. If I have a really nice luxury high-end property, I may have a band come. It may be a big evening event. You know, I may have a full spread of food brought in. It just depends on, you know, it doesn't make sense to do that for a $500,000 home on the market when you have a lot more people in that price range who's going to be looking at that property. So each property has to have a different marketing strategy, and that has to be all analyzed and discussed and decided upon beforehand. So now let's just talk about when we get the offers in. So we're going to cast that net as wide as we can, try to collect as many fish and offers as we can. And we may get multiple offers. And so you need to discuss that strategy up front and what's going to take place when you get those multiple offers that come in and how we're going to handle that. And then we're going to negotiate all sorts of the terms of the REPC, real estate purchase contract. And then we're going to go into contract on those agreed upon terms with the buyer. And then the buyer is going to have to turn in some earnest money. So you'll have to collect some earnest money, or your realtor will have to collect some earnest money. Now, by law, you have to deposit that into a real estate trust account. You cannot commingle it with your personal funds. That's against the law. So if you don't have a real estate trust account, you're going to have to put it with the title company. But there's also risk in doing that, because if there's a dispute, it could take both of you to sign in order to have the earnest money released to the appropriate party that it should be. And that could be a big problem. That's just a whole different animal right there. So you've got the earnest money, and then you have the seller's disclosures. So by law, as a seller, you have to provide seller's disclosures to the buyer. And there are certain specific things that have to be disclosed. And I just always tell my sellers, disclose everything. It's better to disclose it up front than have the buyer move in and, you know, discover later that maybe there's a little bit of mold in the ceiling somewhere. You had a leak 20 years ago. You had it mitigated. That's what you did, but you forgot to disclose that. And now, you know, years down the road, there's discovered there's a little bit of mold in the house. So if you disclose everything right up front, then the buyer can use that information and plan on their inspections that they have done. So you will have to give everything, including HOA information. You know, if there's any improvements to the HOA plans to do and they want to collect money from you in order to do those improvements, all of that has to be disclosed by your seller disclosure deadline. And then the buyer gets all of that information. They decide what inspections they want done. Do they want a radon inspection? Do they want, you know, radon testing? Do they want mold testing and inspection done? Do they just want a straight up inspection done where, you know, the inspector gets up on the roof and checks the roof out and checks the dishwasher and just as a straight up basic inspection? And, you know, or do they want the whole plumbing line scoped out? Now, I do recommend a plumbing line scoped out if it's a old property, Like, for example, up in the Sugar House area, Harvard Yale area up there, where those homes were built back in the 1920s, 1950s, you want to make sure that, there's not roots from trees going into those sewer lines, into those, so you're going to move in and then all of a sudden you're going to find out you're going to have to replace the whole line from the house to the street. You don't want that. And so after the buyer due diligence deadline, there'll be an appraisal period. So the lender will order an appraisal. The buyer will pay for that. And, the buyer does not get to choose the appraiser. The seller does not get to choose the appraiser. There's an arm's length from that. And then so there will be an appraisal deadline. There will also be a financing deadline and a settlement deadline. And so we'll be full swing ahead on getting that loan done. There'll be a lot of follow-up. The buyer will have to do a lot of things. Sometimes it takes some prodding. It just kind of depends on how good the agent is on the other side. Oftentimes I'm making a lot of phone calls. I'm doing a lot of prodding. I'm, talking with the lender and make sure that things are being done. And then also there's a lot of title work that has to take place behind the scenes. And then there is settlement. Now, a lot of people confuse settlement and closing. It's actually a settlement deadline. So settlement is where you go in and you sign all the paperwork. And then closing is behind the scenes when, there's all these little things that take place. Like, for example, the lender will call the employer of the buyer to make sure the buyer still has a job, pull credit again, make sure they didn't, their debt ratio hasn't changed, make sure that their credit hasn't changed. I mean, maybe the buyer went out and signed up for an RC Willie card or some other revolving credit card and bought a bunch of furniture. Now the picture has changed. Maybe they went and bought a new car. Anyway, so things can change and there's times where the loan doesn't close. So but let's assume that the loan closes, most times they do. When the property is finally closed upon, then it's recorded. Now, once the property is recorded, it's legally owned by the buyer. However, the buyer does not get possession to the property until the terms in the contract is met. That was, both parties agreed upon prior to going under contract. So if the buyer agreed to 48 hours that the seller has to be out upon recording, then, so be it. The buyer doesn't have access to the property for 48 hours. Now, I've been in situations where there's many homes in front of the seller. So if you're a seller and you're selling to a buyer, but you're buying another property, and that seller has another property, and that seller has another property, you see the chain that could be there? And if you don't want to sell this property until you can close on the property you're moving into, because oftentimes you need this equity to buy this home. But what happens if 3 homes up the line doesn't fund? Now you got a problem. So when you go into contract, you need to make sure you have the right addendums in place here, or you could be in big trouble when it comes to close on your home. And you could actually, you may be in default, have to default. So anyway, let's say it's time for possession. So now the buyer's time for possession. Yours is coordinated with realtors and the keys are exchanged. There's a garage door opener, there's warranty manuals and other things that go with the property that would be left behind. And that's just a quick rundown on what's involved in selling a home. Now, like I said before, each transaction is different. Some are very complicated. Some involve a lot of different addendums. Some things we have to do a lot differently. But these are the basic things if there is a loan involved on what you need to go through. And meanwhile, this channel is everything about buying a home, selling a home, everything you need to know about real estate. We have real estate, market statistics, property tours, talk about relocation, moving to Utah, and building a home. Just basically, it's a one-stop all for real estate. Go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.